and also a chance to connect with others, participants today. At the conclusion of our next two presentations, we'll have a short Q&A session followed by a coffee break. So, our first speaker of the afternoon is Dr. Arnaud Delorme. Dr. Delorme is a university professor with several affiliations and co-director of the Meditation Research Institute in Rishikesh, India. He has made many contributions to the field of EEG research, reflecting his keen interest in the study of consciousness and spirituality. A long-term Zen mediator, he has taught in India on the neural correlates of conscious experience and has studied brain changes underlying states of consciousness experienced during meditation. In 2012, he conducted a landmark experience on mediumship, showing the neural correlate of accurate mediumship reading. Please welcome Dr. Arnaud Delorme.
Thank you for the nice introduction. And so I'm going to talk to you about this experiment we did in 2012. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce to you IONS, the Institute of the Noetic Sciences. So I'd just like you to close your eyes for a second and just imagine you're in the Apollo 14 mission and you've just landed on the moon, and now it's time to go out on the surface of the moon to collect some rocks. And next slide. Here we go. This is a real video from a Japanese satellite. So this is the Earth rise from the moon. And this is what Edgar Mitchell, the founder of the IONS, experienced when he was on the moon, and it changed him profoundly. When he came back, so this is when he was on Apollo 14, and this is how he looks now, much older. When he came back, he created IONS with this vision, and the retreat center of IONS is called Earthrise because of the vision he had on the moon and the spiritual experience he had. And so in IONS, there are several departments. There's the retreat center, where we have all sorts of groups coming and meetings. Then we have the education center, and then we have research. This is the research team. I'm not in there, but I'm part of the team. So in the corner, you have Cassandra Viet, and she's actually the CEO of IONS. Then in the center, you have Dean Radin, of course, who's like the chief research scientist. You have Garrett Yount, that focuses on molecular biology. You have Lauren Carpenter here, holding his Oscar for, is one of the co-founder of Pixar, and he got interested in random number generators, so he joined the team, and then you have two research technicians, Alan and Lina. And so now I'm going to talk about the experiments we did on mediumship, which is what I focus on. So why is it interesting to look at mediumship? Well, I'm just going to show you another quick video, this time from Morgan Freeman, that shows why it might be interesting.
But the truth is, we still don't know where consciousness comes from or where it goes when we die. If there was a way to measure consciousness, perhaps we could find the answers to these questions.
So I think he says it better than I do. And so this is what we were trying to do in our experiments, measure consciousness of mediums. And this is our experimental protocol where we have a subject right there, and then we have a research assistant that's hooking up the subject. And the subject is a medium, and we ask them to do a reading in the lab. And in this specific protocol, we give them a name, then they do a short meditation, and they connect with the deceased individual, and then we ask them 25 questions in the triple-blind protocol. And for each question, we ask the question, then we ask them to wait 20 seconds, and then they give the answer. And the reason we ask them to wait is because otherwise there will be too much artifact to really analyze the EEG. These are the questions we ask them. So we ask them questions about how was the hair of the deceased person look like, what was their hobbies, what was the cause of death, what was their favorite food. And so we randomize the order of the questions for each of the readings, but this is basically all the questions we ask. And at the end, there is an open-ended question. Is there anything else you can tell us about the deceased person? So this is the exact protocol, a little bit complex, but I think it's worth going through it because with this kind of experiments, it always pinned down to the methodology you use, because skeptics say, well, you don't use the right methodology. And so it's important to detail the methodology. And this experiment was actually, we didn't invent that experiment, Gary did, and so we just copied what he did with his PhD student. And so we have what we call sitter. So sitter are people who want a reading. And so we have here two sitter, sitter A and sitter B, who give their name. They give a name. So sitter A wants a reading about John, for instance, and sitter B wants a reading about Robert. And then the first experiment collects the name John and Robert and gives it to the second experiment. Somebody wants a reading about John, somebody wants a reading about Robert. The second experimenter performed the interview with the medium. First, he does the reading for John, and he doesn't know John. The only thing he knows is the name. And after the medium performed both the reading for John and Robert using the 25 questions outlined below, we collect the reading and we transcribe them on paper, and then we send them back to the sitter. And so we send them back to sitter A and sitter B, but we don't only send them back the reading that was meant for them. For instance, sitter A wanted a reading about John. We also send them the reading about Robert, and they don't know which one is the right one. For sitter B, we send them also both readings. So they have to rate the both reading, and at the end we compare the accuracy of the reading that was really meant for them compared to the reading that was not meant for them. And this avoids some biases because, for instance, you might have a sitter, so somebody what wants a reading, you might have a sitter that could do a very high rating, and you can have a sitter that could do low rating. So the absolute rating by itself, when they say it's accurate, is so subjective. For example, if the deceased person was an electrician, and then the medium says, well, he was working, he's feeling, well, this person was working in houses, I think it was a plumber. Well, you might have a sitter that'll say, yeah, he was working in houses, electrician, plumber, same thing, okay, I'm going to rate 90%. And then you might have another sitter that's going to say, it was not a plumber, it was electrician, 0%. So it's all very subjective. So this is why here we don't consider the actual ratings of the sitter. We consider the differential rating, so the reading that was meant for them compared to the reading that wasn't meant for them. And that compensates for that effect that a sitter might be overly enthusiastic or overly pessimistic. And when we have these mediums in the lab, it's all very subjective. And it's all very technical. I mean, we do statistics, and then we don't get the results until several months later. So as a researcher, and Gary, I think, would agree with that, it's always good to mention the anecdotes. And we have a reader medium. This was our first medium, and we have this professor from UC San Diego that was there, that happened to be there. He wasn't meant to be there. And then our medium was, she was very enthusiastic. She really wanted to convince us what I do is real. And she started reading everybody in the room at lunch. And she was telling this researcher, oh, I see your parents, and then I see your, I'm summarizing right now, it was much longer, but I see your mom is playing piano, and your dad, I see, was traveling between countries, and he was collecting old cars. And so, I mean, that wasn't written on his face. And so these are the kind of anecdotes we would have at lunch, for example. And also, they would give us a lot of intuition how they do their reading. For instance, it would come from a specific part of the space. They would feel it coming from a part of space. Or they would feel, some of them were doing both psychic reading for the future and mediumship reading, and they were telling us, comparing the experience of the two. So it was a lot of that, which was very interesting for us, in addition to the statistical data. This is the accuracy rating. So we had 6 mediums, but 2 we couldn't score. We couldn't score the 2 mediums because the sitter, the person we wanted the reading, didn't want to be involved in the experiment anymore. One of them, for instance, she lost another person, and it was just too hard for her to continue to work with us on the experiment. So we only had ratings for 4 of them. And you can see in blue the rating for the targets, and in red the rating for the decoy. So the blue is the reading that was meant for them, and red is the reading that wasn't meant for them. And you can see in all cases, blue is above red. So I mean, in all cases, they rated the reading that was meant for them above the decoy reading. And for M1 and M5, we reach statistical significance. For instance, for M5, there's 1 chance in 1,000 that we would observe this effect just by pure chance. So to observe this effect, we would need to record 1,000 medium, and this would occur only once. So this was relatively convincing. Then we started looking at the brain data, what was happening in the brain, in brain waves. So it's just a short, simplified summaries of different brainwave of potential interest. You have delta brainwave, which is on the bottom, which are related to unconsciousness, very deep sleep. You have theta brainwave, which are a little bit faster, about 5 oscillations per second, which is related to working memory and also in some meditation states. You have alpha brainwaves, which are related to relaxation, and beta brainwaves, which are often related to alertness. And of course, this is very simplified because it also depends on where they occur in the brain. So we had a subject, we collected data, so these are just the time series, and then we looked at the amplitude of different brain waves in the data. And for example, here in this representation, you would see, well, I have some brainwave of low amplitude and I have some brainwave of high amplitude for some electrodes. And then what we do is then we assign a number for each of the scalp electrodes. So this is the head of the subject. You have the 2 ears, the nose on the front, and then we have the amplitude of the brainwave, which is encoded by a number at each of the electrode sites. And you can see some of the electrodes are outside the head. They're not really outside the head. It's just because they're below what we call the midline, so you can't see them. So it's just how we represent them. So now we have these numbers, and the way we represent these numbers is that we built a 3D landscape like this, where the height represents the numbers. So the higher the number, the higher the height. The higher the number, the more red it is. The lower the number, the more blue it is. And then we put it back on the scalp topography. So when it's red, it means that the amplitude of the brainwave is higher, and when it's blue, it means the amplitude of the brainwave at a given frequency is lower. And then we can also do some more fancy representation on the, by projecting on the head of the subject. There's just some basic theory how we do our analysis. We collect the data, we look at the amplitude of a brainwave, for instance, in the theta band, and then we represent it in this way. So what we did is that we divided, so for each of the medium, we had several questions, and then based on the feedback from the sitter, we had questions on which they did poorly. They were not able to really get any insight for that question. And then we had questions on which they did very well. So we divided questions, we split in the middle, we said below the midline, accuracy is low performance, above midline is high performance. So we got two types of questions, low performance, high performance. And so we got two types of EEG data, low performance EEG data, high performance EEG data. And this is what we observe. So this is the amplitude of the brainwave in the theta band for the low and the high performance. And this is the difference. And you see the black dots here indicate where it is significant. And of course here we have many electrodes, so some might arise, some might be significant by the fact we do many comparisons, but we do take that into account in this analysis. This is the same thing. This is a 3D representation. Yeah, you can play the movie, where we just it's just the same kind of representation, but so we try to project it on the 3D head, so it's nicer to look at. And what's here, the interpretation of this is that this specific area represents often working memory. Like if, for instance, if I ask you, okay, you need to remember 3 numbers, and I give you 3 numbers to remember, and now I'm giving you 4 numbers and 5 numbers. Well, what happens is that the amplitude in this specific area, which is called frontal midline, gets increased based on the number you have to retain. So it's an indicator of working memory. So here the interpretation of this data is that for this specific case, it might be possible that this represents emptying your working memory. Like for when the medium does accurate reading, this might mean that they're emptying their working memory, so they're not thinking. At least that's our interpretation of the data. This is this is what we could do, but we haven't done. This is more of my mainstream research, where after extracting a specific effect, we look in the brain. So this is a brain glass. So this is a 3D brain. If you can play the movie again, this is the 3D brain where we have isolated different brain area, and then we compute the communication between different brain areas. We haven't done that for that specific experiment, but this could be, because it takes some time, but this could be a next step. What we also did is that, so we divided the trials here into the low accuracy and the high accuracy. We also had enough trials. We had like about 30 trials to divide them into 3 groups: low accuracy, middle accuracy, and high accuracy. And when we did that, we did found that the amplitude of the brainwave was decreasing linearly. So for instance, if when we were in the middle, right there, if the middle was not, if at Q2 we're not in between Q1 and Q3, this wouldn't be a good sign. Here it's a good sign because it means we have a gradient. So as you decrease, as the accuracy improves, the brainwave decreases. So it's another indication that what we are observing is not artifactual. For this experiment, we also did a second experiment with these mediums. And what we ask them is that we ask them to experience 4 mental states. And the first mental state was recall. So they had to think about somebody from their family, for instance, or a close friend. The second was perception. We just asked them to listen to biographies. Then the third mental state was mediumship. We asked them to communicate with a deceased person they knew. And then the last one was fabrication, where we just asked them to make up somebody. And so you can see on the top, we have each state we ask them to do for 60 seconds. Then they have 10 seconds to rest, and then they start the next state. And we repeat each state 4 times. And the reason we do that is that if we don't repeat the state 4 times, there might be just fluctuation in the EEG where we would see difference which are not necessarily there. So that's why they have to do it several times. And ideally they would do it 100 times, but we can't keep them that long, so they only do it 12 times. This is the average of the 4 states. And actually, so the difference between the 4 states is relatively small. So what we do is that we show the average, and then we show the deviation from average. And that's what is represented here. So we have mediumship, fabrication, perception, and recollection. And then what we did is that we look at the number of mediums that show the difference between each pair of states. So for instance, here, we have this disk, and they show the bigger the disk, the larger the number of mediums that that had the difference between these 2 states. And also when they're the colors, you can see there is blue and red in them. So when it's red, it's in one direction, meaning mediumship is larger than perception, and when it's blue, it's in the opposite direction. So basically, you want it to be all the same color, because it means all the medium, they had a similar difference between the 2 mental states. And so we did that between all the pairs of states. And to summarize, we did find reliable differences between different mental states. By the way, this is specifically in the higher frequency bands, in the gamma band. So we did find differences. For instance, mediumship doesn't look like fabrication, mediumship doesn't look like perception, and mediumship doesn't look like recollection. And for us, this is an indication that the mental state they were experiencing is distinct from these other mental states. We wrote a scientific report in Frontier in Psychology. It was published in 2012. And now we're doing another experiment, which I'm going to describe right now. And this is our website. So in this website, you go on the website, and then you press the start button, and you have instructions. You enter your name. And basically, your goal in this experiment is to tell if people are alive or dead. So you enter how intuitive do you think you are, how confident are you that you get good results in this experiment. It's loading the images, and then you'll see some images, and you have 5 buttons on the bottom. You can actually do the test. It's called intuitiontest.org. And then you just have to say probably living, uncertain, probably deceased, definitely deceased. So you have 200 pictures to classify. And at the end, you get your score, and then you get entered into the Hall of Fame. So a few minutes later, you're finishing the task. It lasts about 10 minutes. It takes you about 10 minutes. And when you get to 200, it tells you, okay, you're done. And you did 51.3%. You're expected to classify a chance by 50%. You're performing slightly above average. And if you go to the Hall of Fame on the bottom, it gives you the odds against chance to obtain that result. So you see the first one is the odds against chance is 208. So there's one chance in 208, so they would just obtain this by chance. But of course, if you have more than 200 people in your database, one person by chance is going to obtain this kind of odds. So you have to really look at all the people that did the task. We took great care in this task to select the pictures. So this is the original picture, and then what we do is that we click on 4 points around their head, and then we reframe the picture, make sure they have the same number of pixels. We use Photoshop to remove the background so people can just use screen capture and just Google it. You can do Google image search these days. With this, they can't just capture the image and try to find it on Google. And then we also try to balance the image between all the people that were alive and all the people that were dead. There's about half of them are alive, half of them are past. And for instance, they would have, so we have a rating software where we look at each image, and then we enter, is it a male or a female, what's their age, are they wearing glasses, no glasses, or do they look directly at the camera or not directly at the camera, are they smiling, not smiling, is it a good resolution picture, etc., and the color of their hair. And we have 3 raters, so we have 3 people that look at all the pictures. So we can combine their rating, and then we have a software that's automatically going to select 100 pictures of people who are alive, 100 pictures of people who have passed, and it's going to make sure that they don't differ along any of these categories. In addition, we take pictures from our main database is from it's a classroom from the 1950s. So these are classroom pictures, individual pictures from the 1950s. About half of the people have passed. And so we took these pictures and then we apply this whole methodology to make sure they look similar. So when we did this, and this is with 100 participants, so we use 100 participants here. These are the 100 first participants. And you see that the odds against chance is 1 out of 150. So the performance is close to 51%, and then the error bar right there indicates the 95. It might be the standard error of the mean, and then the obtaining this result by chance is 1 out of 150. So it means that if this was by chance, it means that you would do the same experiment 150 times and you would only obtain this result once, which is, so it's a pretty good result. What we also had, we had robots. So we call them robots. They're really computer program that just basically go on the web and click randomly just to check. There is no bias in our software. And then the robots were at chance level, so you can see that the 50% level overlap with the standard error. So it's promising, and we are planning to do the same experiments and collect EEG data for some mediums, so we can both get behavioral data, so we can see how accurate they are at classifying the pictures, and we can also get their unconscious data. Just looking at the brainwave, is there a difference in the brainwave between the pictures of the live and the dead individuals? And for the future, we are only planning to retest two of our best mediums to see if our results are reproducible, both on the mental state, although we will only compare mediumship and fabrication, and on the image test. Another improvement we want to do with our experiment is that, and I discussed that with Gary, he agrees, so I got the green light, is that one of the issue, if you don't have a lot of sitters, so if you don't have a lot of subjects, one of the issue is that when they're rating, right there, when it's circled in red, when they're doing the rating, so when they're saying, oh, this was accurate, this was not accurate, they're rating all the questions for the first reading, and they're rating all the questions for the second reading afterwards. And for instance, so when you're doing the rating, if you're really true with yourself, you just answer each question, as you think it is true or not. You don't take into account the previous questions. But it might be that some sitter, they would read the first question, they would say, oh, that's my reading, and they would rate everything high on that specific reading. And then the second reading comes, is also, that's not my reading, I'm going to rate everything low. And if you have enough subject, that's not a problem, because it's just a bit more noise in the data. But if you have few subjects, it could potentially bias the results. So in a subsequent version, what we will do is that we'll randomize. So we'll have a computer program, a web server, where we just randomize the answers from the medium, either from the decoy reading or the real reading, so there won't be any correlation between subsequent question. Or if there is correlation, they won't influence our results. So that's basically what I had to say. And this one details the process a little bit, where we randomize the decoy and the target reading. And when we also plan to put a voice sample, because we think the voice of the medium might be important too. So we want to put a voice sample, and then we also have more advanced statistics we want to use. We want to use what happens in mediumship is that the medium might give a very accurate answer, and then it would be a chance. So what happens is that if you average all the answers, it would be like, oh, this medium is a chance. But he gives this very accurate answer that really touch the person. And that's often the story you hear is like, oh, he said this, and this was so meaningful for me. So when they do the ratings, we will also ask the sitter to say, what do you think is the likelihood they would just have guessed that by chance? And if it's the color of the hair, okay, their hair was brown, well, I would say 50%, But, if they say, well, they have a white rabbit in their bed or something, you could say, well, here, they would rate that, well, it's very unlikely. So we'll have a scale of 1 to 10, likely to unlikely. And the advantage of doing that is that we can weight each answer based on the fact that it is likely the medium would find it or not. So we can do more fine-grained tuning. So if the medium gives one very good answer and all the rest is a chance, it doesn't matter, because this procedure should take care of this. So that's basically what I had to say for the mediumship study. Now I just want to mention something else we have at IONS. And we did Marlene Schlitz, which was the previous CEO of IONS. She did this movie that's called Death Makes Life Possible, together with Deepak Chopra. And so they obtained several official selections. They also got some awards, which are not listed there. And it's all about how death is part of life and how it makes life possible. So this was sponsored by the Institute of Noetic Sciences as well. It's not linked necessarily to mediumship. It's just another stream more on the education side, but I thought it would be interesting to show it to you. So it's just a 3-minute trailer on the movie.
It's really important that we confront our fear of death in order to live more fully.
I know I'm afraid of death because I don't want to think a different way. I don't want to become a different person. I just want to stay who I am.
I thought, I'll just kill myself. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Like, that'll put an end to all this pain.
I'm 53 years old and was told about 5 weeks ago that I'm dying.
I think our fear of death leads to a lot of maladaptive behaviors. If we think that it's all over and that's the end and that we're separate, then it doesn't give us that sense of responsibility.
I personally have more fear of an unfulfilled life than of death itself.
On the day when death will knock at your door, what will you give to him?
This is my mother.
I've lost her 2004. It's comforting to me that I can come and talk to her.
What do I think might be next? I think we get recycled. I think we come back into life for new and different experiences.
From a scientific point of view, people have looked at near death, out of body, reincarnation. These kinds of experiences actually can be documented and studied.
After 50 years of research now, we've got 2,500 cases in our files of young children who reported memories of previous lives.
Scientifically, we don't know if identity, self-awareness can survive death. That's more of a spiritual belief right now than a scientific belief. But I trust my intuition more than anything, and my intuition says, yes, this is probably the case.
The body ends, but something, it seems to me, continues. What I was experiencing in a state of pure consciousness was actually inside the lowest level that's measured of coma, which is called a Glasgow Coma Scale 3, was a constant voyage of vistas that kept opening one after the next, after the next. I don't think consciousness begins or ends. I think it's a continuum.
Clearly, the cross-cultural evidence suggests that people all over the world and throughout history have thought that consciousness is more than just our physical being. Different religions, different cultural groups have created practices to honor that transition.
And the lamp that lit my dark corner is out. A summons has come, and I'm ready for my journey.
It's hard to watch the people I love suffer. And I have to say it's harder for them than it is for me because I'm not suffering with this. I suffer with physical discomfort. The pain is not fun. Pain sucks. But dying doesn't. Dying is just what we do.
I've wondered about what happens after death, but I've never figured out the answer.
Contemplating death can really bring us peace. Without impermanency, there's no change. There's no change, there's no life. Can you imagine a life without any change? Doesn't exist.
So thank you for your attention. And again here, Dean Radin, my mentor, who welcomed me to the Institute of Noetic Science 4 years ago. Thank you.